The Galactic Council chamber had not been silent for over 10,000 years. It was built to echo with voices, arguments, laughter, threats, applause. A ring of floating thrones circled a dying blue star at its center, each seat holding the ruler of a civilization that had survived long enough to believe it always would. Tonight, there was no sound. Thousands of eyes were fixed on a single platform at the center of the chamber. One figure stood there. Human. No armor. No visible weapons. No guards. Just a tall, fragile body wrapped in dark fabric, hands folded behind the back, face calm in a place where calm did not exist. The council had expected fear. They had expected anger. Maybe begging. Instead, the human waited. A massive being of stone and light leaned forward on its throne. Its voice rolled across the chamber like thunder. Humanity stands accused of resisting galactic order, of refusing integration, of wasting lives in a war it could not win. The human did not respond. Another ruler spoke, this one mechanical, its voice sharp and cold. Your species vanished from the stars 2 centuries ago. Your fleets were destroyed. Your homeworld burned. By all measures, you should not be here. Still, the human said nothing. The silence stretched. Sensors around the chamber flickered. No alarms sounded, but several council members noticed something strange. Background star noise was dropping. Not spiking. Dropping. As if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. The stone ruler raised one glowing limb. Despite this, it said, the council has chosen mercy. A ripple of quiet pride passed through the chamber. We offer peace, limited sovereignty, reconstruction aid. Humanity will exist again, under our guidance. At last, the human lifted their head. Their eyes moved slowly across the thrones. Ancient beings, immortal minds, rulers who had watched species rise and fall like sparks in the dark. The human's voice was calm, soft, almost gentle. May I ask one question? The council allowed it. They were curious, amused. Why did you believe humanity was gone? The human asked. A few rulers exchanged glances. You lost, the mechanical ruler replied. Your resistance ended. Your signals stopped. The human nodded. And did you ever ask why? The chamber shifted uneasily. The stone ruler let out a low rumble. You are stalling. No, the human said. I am remembering. Lights dimmed slightly as the dying star at the center of the chamber pulsed. Once, twice, then steadied. The human took a slow breath. When our cities burned, the human said, we screamed for help. No response from the council. When our fleets were erased, the human continued. We begged for negotiation. Silence. When our children fled Earth in ships that barely worked, the human said, voice tightening just a little, your council called it an internal matter. A sharp sound cut through the chamber. An alarm. Then another. Then dozens. Council members erupted in confusion as displays around the chamber began to light up, then go dark, then light up again with data that made no sense. Star maps shifted. Orders vanished. Unknown signals appeared everywhere at once. What is happening? One ruler demanded. A sensor master screamed from the upper tiers. We are detecting mass movement across deep space. No warp signatures, no known drives. The mechanical ruler turned back to the human. What have you done? The human smiled. Not with joy, with relief. You see, the human said quietly, we did not stop fighting. The dying star at the center of the chamber suddenly went dark. Not exploded, not collapsed. Simply turned off. Emergency light flooded the chamber as panic finally broke the silence. Ancient rulers shouted orders. Fleets were summoned. Weapons armed. Too late. Screens across the chamber filled with images from the edges of the galaxy. From places long thought empty. Dead. Forgotten. Ships began to appear. Human ships. Not massive. Not beautiful. Not intimidating by design. But there were too many. They moved without formations. Without signals. Without fear. The human envoy stood alone as the greatest powers in the galaxy realized something horrifying. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had gone quiet. The human looked up at the frozen council and spoke the final words of the meeting. Peace, they said, was offered once. Behind them, unseen fleets crossed the final distance from the dark. We came today, the human finished, to answer your decision. The chamber shook as reality itself bent. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, the rulers were afraid. The Galactic Council did not sleep. They had never needed to. Their kind replaced rest with cycles of thought, reflection, and prediction. For 10,000 years, every possible future had been calculated within those walls. Until now, the chamber buzzed with overlapping voices, alarms, and raw disbelief. Holographic displays hovered in broken clusters, flickering between star charts and error symbols no system could explain. Human ships were everywhere, not concentrated, not advancing in straight lines. They appeared across deep space in patterns that made no tactical sense, until the Council's analysts realized the truth. This was not an invasion. It was a reveal. The stone ruler, ancient and scarred by eons of rule, slammed a glowing limb against its throne. Compile records, it commanded. Every file, every archive. Humanity's extinction reports, now. Data streamed in. Old war footage. Battle summaries. Casualty numbers so large they blurred into abstraction. Earth marked in red, then gray, then officially classified as non-recoverable. The Council had closed the book on humanity centuries ago. That was the mistake. A thin, insect-like ruler spoke, voice trembling. These reports, they stop abruptly. No final surrender. No extinction confirmation. Another voice cut in, sharp with fear. Because they didn't die, they vanished. The human envoy stood unmoving as the Council tore through its own history. The chamber filled with images the galaxy had forgotten. Human colonies burning under orbital fire. Refugee ships jumping blindly into uncharted space. Distress signals looping unanswered for years. Then, silence. No more signals. No more trade. No more noise. We thought they destroyed themselves, the mechanical ruler said slowly. Their internal conflicts were legendary. The human tilted their head slightly. Yes, they said. We are very good at that. The Council ignored the tone. They were too busy realizing something far worse. One of the younger analysts, its voice barely steady, spoke from the upper tiers. Human military doctrine shifted in the final years of the war. They stopped engaging in open conflict. They abandoned territory without resistance. That was collapse, another ruler snapped. No, the analyst replied. It was withdrawal. A new projection filled the chamber, human space maps layered over galactic charts. The overlap was unsettling. Humanity had not fled outward. They had gone sideways, into regions the galaxy had deemed useless, empty, too unstable for long-term settlement. Areas filled with radiation storms, gravitational fractures, and dead stars. Places no one bothered to watch. The human envoy spoke again, voice steady. When we realized no one was coming, they said, we stopped asking for help. The chamber quieted. When we realized the galaxy only respects strength, the human continued. We stopped trying to be understood. A ruler with bioluminescent skin flickered nervously. You were losing. Hiding was survival. Yes, the human said. But survival was not the goal. New data surged onto the displays. Human population numbers, not shrinking. Stabilizing. Then growing. Industrial output, not spiking. Steady. Controlled. Technological signatures, strange. Quiet. Optimized not for speed or power, but efficiency and resilience. They didn't rebuild like us, one council scientist whispered. They didn't chase expansion. They refined, another replied. The human looked at the council, eyes reflecting the chaos around them. We studied everything, they said. Your weapons. Your politics. Your arrogance. The envoy paused. And ourselves. The council reviewed intercepted fragments of human communication recovered from the deep archives. They were not war cries. Not propaganda. They were lessons. Never be loud again. Never fight fair. Never let the enemy know when you are ready. A chilling realization spread through the chamber. Humanity had not been preparing for revenge. They had been preparing for inevitability. The stone ruler's voice cracked with something dangerously close to fear. How long? The human answered without hesitation. 212 years. The number hit the council harder than any weapon. 2 centuries of silence. 2 centuries of uninterrupted learning. 2 centuries without interference, without oversight, without distraction. The galaxy had grown complacent in that time. Empires rose. Empires fell. Borders shifted. Councils argued. Humanity watched it all. A sudden report flashed across the chamber. Multiple galactic relay nodes are offline, an operator shouted. No signs of attack, Just shut down. Another voice followed. Trade lanes are destabilizing. Hyperlane beacons are responding to unknown command codes. The mechanical ruler turned sharply toward the human. You are violating galactic law. The human met its gaze. We were never under your law. The envoy took a step forward. It was a small movement, but the chamber reacted like prey sensing a predator's shadow. You believed we vanished because we were weak, the human said. You were wrong. Another step. We vanished because strength is loud. The displays shifted again. This time, they showed something the council had never seen. Human shipyards, hidden inside dead systems, built into asteroid remains, woven through gravity wells that tore apart conventional vessels. Not massive factories, thousands of small ones. Decentralized, replaceable, impossible to cripple all at once. They learned, one ruler whispered, from losing. The human nodded once. Loss teaches faster than victory. A junior council member spoke, voice shaking. If you wanted revenge, why wait this long? The human's expression changed then, not to anger, not to pride, but to something heavier. Because vengeance without certainty is just another loss. Silence returned to the chamber. Not the tense silence from before, but something deeper, something final. Outside the council's protected space, more human ships emerged from the dark. They did not fire. They did not broadcast demands. They simply arrived. The galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. Humanity did not return because it was angry. Humanity returned because it was ready. The human envoy turned back toward the council, voice quiet but unshakable. You offered peace today, they said. A pause. We remember when you did not. As the chamber lights flickered again, the council realized something far worse than war was coming. Humanity was not here to reclaim the past. They were here to decide the future. And in the cold silence of the chamber, the rulers finally understood. Being forgotten had been the most dangerous weapon humanity ever built. The first galactic fleet died without a battle. That was what terrified everyone. It happened at the edge of the Kari's corridor, a hyperlane so vital that half the outer systems depended on it to survive. When the council ordered the fleet to mobilize, it was not meant to attack. It was meant to observe, to remind the galaxy that order still existed. 3,000 ships, multiple species, generations of combined doctrine. They never fired a single shot. Observers watching through long-range sensors saw the fleet slow, just slightly, then drift apart, as if confused. Power signatures fluctuated. Shields flickered. Engines failed one by one. Then the ships went dark. No explosions. No debris. No radiation spikes. They were simply gone. Not destroyed. Removed. Across the galaxy, panic spread faster than light should allow. Trade networks flooded with fragmented reports. Military channels collapsed under the weight of questions no one could answer. What weapon does this? Is it a virus? A gravity anomaly? A new form of stealth? The truth was worse. The truth was that humanity was no longer fighting war as the galaxy understood it. Back in the council chamber, the human envoy watched as real-time updates bled across the remaining displays. Entire defensive grids failed without warning. Ancient automated fortresses, built before some species evolved, went silent. The stone ruler struggled to maintain authority. Identify the attack vector, it demanded. There must be a source. There is no source, a council scientist replied, voice shaking. Their ships are not emitting hostile energy. They are not targeting our vessels. The mechanical ruler's voice dropped to a near whisper. Then how are we losing? The human answered before anyone else could. Because you built your empires on systems, they said. We built ours on assumptions. The council turned as one. You assumed no one would ever choose restraint over expansion. The human continued. You assumed louder meant stronger. Faster meant better. Bigger meant safer. The envoy gestured toward the darkened star at the center of the chamber. You assumed the universe rewarded dominance. The star flickered faintly, as if responding. Human ships did not carry weapons in the traditional sense. There were no cannons visible on their hulls. No missile bays. No glowing cores that screamed power. Instead, they carried something far more dangerous. Understanding. Human engineers had studied galactic technology for centuries. They mapped how energy flowed through shields, how fleets synchronized navigation, how empires relied on shared infrastructure to function. And then they asked a simple question. What happens if nothing breaks, but nothing works? The answer was playing out across the stars. Hyperdrives failed not because they were damaged, but because they no longer agreed on where space ended and began. Shield generators remained intact, but could not align with the frequencies they were designed to counter. Weapons systems powered on flawlessly, then found no valid targets. Human technology did not overpower. It disconnected. A ruler with elongated eyes hissed in panic. This is sabotage on a galactic scale. The human nodded. Yes. You cannot disable entire regions without central control, another shouted. The envoy's gaze hardened. You still think like rulers. They took a slow step forward. We removed the center. Reports flooded in faster now. Supply worlds isolated. Defense pacts useless. Fleets stranded light years from command, unable to receive orders or return home. Not because humanity blocked communication. Because humanity made communication unnecessary. Each system was forced to function alone, and most could not. A young council member cried out. They are not attacking civilians. That is intentional, the stone ruler growled. They want compliance. No, the human corrected quietly. We want clarity. The council struggled to understand. Human ships appeared near major population centers, but did nothing. They hovered at impossible distances, silent and still, like reminders rather than threats. No demands were made. No ultimatums issued. That was when the fear truly set in. Because war without demands meant there was nothing to negotiate. The council attempted to retaliate. A coordinated strike was ordered against one of the newly revealed human shipyards, hidden inside a dead system with no habitable worlds. The fleet jumped in and vanished. Not lost, not destroyed, just erased from all known reference frames. Sensor logs ended mid-sentence. Crew recordings cut off without distress. The galaxy began to whisper a single word in terror. Unfair. The human envoy watched the council fracture under the weight of helplessness. You are using forbidden methods, the mechanical ruler said. Reality manipulation. Existential weapons. The human's voice dropped. No, they said. We are using memory. The envoy activated a projection. Images filled the chamber. Earth cities burning, oceans boiling, orbital debris falling like rain. Human refugees pressed against cracked viewports as their planet shrank into ruin behind them. We remember what it felt like, the human said, to face weapons that did not care if we understood them. The projection shifted. Human research facilities. Quiet rooms. Long nights. Children growing up in underground habitats, learning science before art, patience before pride. We learned the lesson you taught us, the envoy continued. That mercy is only offered when it costs nothing. The council's oldest ruler spoke again, voice heavy with dread. If this continues, galactic civilization will collapse. Yes, the human said. That is the risk. The envoy paused. And also the cure. Another system went dark. Then another. Not destroyed. Disconnected. The galaxy was being forced into stillness. The human turned away from the council and looked toward the stars beyond the chamber walls. For centuries, you managed peace by controlling power, they said. We will manage peace by removing the need for it. The stone ruler's voice broke. What do you want from us? The human looked back. Not angry, not triumphant. Resolved. We want you to understand, they said, what it means to be helpless. Outside the chamber, human fleets continued their silent advance. Not toward thrones or capitals, but toward the invisible systems that kept empires alive. Logistics, dependencies, comfort. Across the galaxy, rulers discovered a truth they had never faced before. Their strength had always been borrowed, and humanity had just called in the debt. As the council chamber dimmed once more, the human envoy delivered a final warning, quiet enough to be missed, heavy enough to echo forever. This is not our wrath, they said. This is us making sure you can never do it again. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the galaxy realized the most terrifying thing of all. Humanity was not fighting to win. They were fighting to end the game. The war slowed. That alone terrified the galaxy more than the first wave of silence. After weeks of cascading failures, fleets stranded, empires cut apart, ancient systems rendered useless, the human advance paused. No new regions went dark. No more fleets vanished. The invisible pressure that had crushed galactic power structures eased just enough for something worse to settle in. Anticipation. Across thousands of worlds, leaders waited for demands that never came. They prepared apologies, reparations, surrender terms. Entire civilizations stood ready to kneel. Humanity did not ask them to. Inside the human command network, spread across light years, hidden within places no enemy could reach, leaders gathered in quiet rooms. Not thrones, not halls of celebration, rooms of memory. Holograms filled the space. Archived footage from 2 centuries earlier. Earth before the fire. Cities alive with noise, light, disagreement, hope. Children running through streets that no longer existed. An elderly human commander stood at the center of the room. His uniform bore no medals. His face carried the weight of too many years spent remembering. "They're scared now," a younger officer said softly. "The council is collapsing. We've achieved strategic dominance." The commander nodded, but his eyes did not leave the images. "Dominance was never the goal," he replied. Another projection activated. The day Earth burned. Orbital strikes lit the planet's surface like cracks of molten gold. Defense platforms failed in seconds. Civilian evacuation ships, too few, too slow, were torn apart as they fled. The room fell silent. "We asked for peace then," the commander said. "Not because we were weak. Because we still believed it mattered." No one disagreed. Another officer spoke, her voice tight. "Some of the council species weren't involved. Entire worlds are suffering now because of infrastructure collapse." The commander closed his eyes. "I know." He opened them again. "That is the price of teaching a galaxy a lesson it refused to learn." Across the stars, human fleets began moving again, but differently. They did not target military systems. They targeted memory. Human ships appeared above worlds that had once voted against intervention. Above planets that had watched Earth burn and labeled it necessary balance. Above trade hubs that had profited from the war while claiming neutrality. No weapons fired. Instead, signals broadcast, simple, unencrypted, impossible to block. Human voices. Survivors. A woman speaking about carrying her brother's ashes through vacuum because there was nowhere left to bury him. A man describing the sound Earth made when its oceans boiled. A child, now an old voice, remembering the day the stars stopped answering. These messages played on repeat across planetary skies, public networks, and private channels. Not propaganda. Testimony. The galaxy had always treated war as numbers. Humanity forced it to listen to names. In the council chamber, what remained of the rulers watched the broadcasts in silence. No one ordered them shut down. No one could. The stone ruler finally spoke. "Why show us this now?" The human envoy stood before them, posture unchanged, voice steady. "Because you think this war is about power," they said. "It isn't." The envoy gestured toward the projections of human suffering. "It's about cost." Another ruler lashed out, voice sharp with frustration. "You are punishing the innocent." The human did not deny it. "So did you," they said. "The difference is that we remember every face." The council tried one last tactic. A full apology was drafted. Unanimous, public, unconditional. Reparations offered. Technology shared. Borders redrawn. Earth promised restoration. The message was sent across every channel that still functioned. The human response came minutes later. Not from the council chamber. From Earth. Or what remained of it. A live feed appeared on galactic networks. A gray, scarred planet wrapped in debris and broken satellites. No oceans visible from space. No lights on the dark side. A single human stood on the surface, helmet removed despite the thin air. The wind carried ash across cracked ground. "This is Earth," the human said. "We appreciate your apology." The camera panned. Graves stretched to the horizon. Not marked by stone, but by metal fragments from ships that had never made it out. "You want to rebuild this?" The voice continued. "With what?" "Your forgiveness." The feed cut. Back in human command, the elderly commander lowered his head. "Begin Phase C," he said. The order rippled outward. This phase was not about destruction. It was about consequence. Human technology began restoring limited functionality to select systems, carefully chosen ones. Worlds that had sheltered refugees. Species that had spoken out, even when it cost them trade or safety. They were reconnected. Everyone else remained isolated. The galaxy fractured into 2 realities. Those who could function, and those who had to survive without the systems they had always depended on. Panic turned to desperation. Desperation turned to change. Civilizations learned to govern themselves again. Fleets learned to operate without constant command. Economies were forced to become local, resilient, human-like. It was painful. It was slow. It was intentional. In the council chamber, the mechanical rulers spoke one final time. You are reshaping the galaxy in your image. The human envoy shook their head. No, they said. We are removing the image you forced on everyone else. A pause. Survival should not require permission. The envoy turned to leave. As they did, the stone ruler asked the question every species feared to hear the answer to. When will this end? The humans stopped. They did not turn back. When the galaxy no longer needs us to threaten it, they said. When no world can burn in silence again. The envoy walked away. Outside, the stars remained dark, not from destruction, but from restraint. Humanity was still holding back. And that was what frightened the galaxy most of all. Because if this was the cost of human mercy, no one wanted to imagine the price of human anger. The galaxy did not collapse all at once. It unraveled. At first, leaders told their people the disruptions were temporary. Supply delays, communication errors, a period of adjustment. They promised normalcy would return soon. It did not. Within weeks, worlds that had never grown their own food discovered they no longer knew how. Energy-rich systems found themselves unable to distribute power beyond their own orbits. Medical technologies dependent on off-world components failed quietly, one patient at a time. There were no explosions, no dramatic endings, just absence. Entire civilizations realized, too late, that they had built themselves to function only as parts of a greater machine. And the machine was gone. Humanity had not destroyed the galaxy's heart. They had removed its crutches. On the trade world of Viral, once a shining hub of interstellar commerce, markets stood empty. Towers that once pulsed with light dimmed as energy reserves dwindled. The ruling council argued endlessly over who was to blame, but arguments did not feed the hungry. A broadcast from a nearby system finally broke through the static. Not a demand, an instruction. Localize production. Reduce dependency. Stabilize before expansion. The message repeated once, then vanished. It was human. Across the galaxy, similar messages appeared, never forceful, never repeated. Simple guidance, offered only once. Those who listened survived better than those who did not. Many refused out of pride. They paid for it. Old empires fractured under the strain. Border worlds declared independence when support never arrived. Military fleets mutinied, not out of rebellion, but necessity. Crews deserted to protect their home systems instead of distant rulers who could no longer help them. The Galactic Council tried to intervene. They failed. Without the infrastructure humanity had disabled, the Council's authority meant nothing. Orders could not reach fleets. Punishments could not be enforced. The very idea of centralized rule began to feel outdated, almost absurd. Inside the council chamber, only a fraction of the original rulers remained. Some had retreated to their homeworlds. Others had simply gone silent, their fate unknown. The stone ruler watched reports scroll endlessly across damaged displays. Entire sectors are ignoring us, it said. They no longer recognize council authority. The mechanical ruler replied with a bitter edge. Authority requires leverage. Humanity took it away. The human envoy stood nearby, observing. You built peace on dependency, they said. Dependency always collapses. A remaining ruler snapped back, desperation breaking through its composure. You've turned survival into a test. Millions are suffering. Yes, the human said quietly. So did you. The envoy gestured toward a projection showing hundreds of worlds struggling to adapt. This is what happens when systems grow too large to care, they continued. You mistook scale for stability. The council had no answer. Across human-controlled space, something different was happening. Human systems, small, scattered, often hidden, remained calm. They produced their own food, their own energy, their own ships. Each system was designed to survive alone if necessary, and cooperate only when it chose to. Children were taught not just history, but failure. Not just success, but collapse. Humanity had turned trauma into doctrine. A human commander addressed a council of regional leaders, humans and non-humans alike, through a secure channel. Do not rush to rebuild what failed, she said. If something cannot survive without control, it should not exist. Some argued. Some pleaded for faster restoration. Humanity refused. We are not here to save the galaxy from pain, the commander said. We are here to save it from repeating this. Meanwhile, rumors spread through the stars. Stories of human fleets watching, but not intervening. Of worlds that rebuilt themselves, earning quiet reconnection. Of rulers who stepped down to let local governance take hold, only to find human support appear days later. Humanity was not rewarding obedience. They were rewarding responsibility. This frightened the old powers more than annihilation ever could, because it meant humanity was changing the rules. On the fractured capital world of the Council, protests filled the lower levels. Citizens demanded food, answers, leadership that could actually lead. For the first time in history, the rulers heard the voices of those they had governed from above. They did not know how to respond. The mechanical ruler finally broke the council's long silence. We must negotiate again, it said. Not as rulers. As equals. The stone ruler turned slowly. They will not accept that. They might, the mechanical ruler replied. Because this was never about conquest. As if summoned by the thought, the human envoy spoke. You are beginning to understand, they said. The envoy stepped into the center of the chamber. The galaxy you ruled was fragile, they continued. It survived only because no one challenged its weaknesses. A pause. We did. Outside the chamber, reports confirmed what many feared and others quietly hoped. The old galactic economy was dead. In its place, thousands of smaller networks were forming. Local trade, regional alliances, cooperative defense groups not tied to distant thrones. It was chaotic. It was uneven. It was alive. A junior council member, voice raw with exhaustion, asked the question everyone was thinking. What if we fail to adapt? The human did not answer immediately. When they did, their voice carried no threat, only truth. Then you will end, they said. Not by our hand, by your own design. The envoy looked around the chamber, at the empty thrones, the fading symbols of power. You believed peace was the absence of war, they said. We believe peace is the presence of resilience. The council chamber dimmed further as energy reserves dropped again. No alarms sounded this time. Everyone already knew. The galaxy was starving, not just for resources, but for a new way to exist. And humanity, once forgotten, now stood at the center of that transformation, not as rulers, not as gods, but as the species that survived collapse first. As the chamber lights flickered one last time, a message echoed quietly across the remaining networks. Human, short, unmistakable, adapt, or be remembered. The galaxy listened, because it finally understood that this war was never about destruction. It was about whether civilization deserved to continue at all, and humanity was no longer willing to accept the wrong answer. The galactic capital had never known fear. It was built at the center of everything, layer upon layer of impossible engineering wrapped around a stable artificial star. Every hyperlane led to it. Every major decision passed through it. To rule the galaxy was to sit there and believe nothing could ever truly reach you. Now, the capital was alone. No trade fleets arrived. No ambassadors requested docking. The great traffic rings that once glowed with endless motion were dark, rotating out of habit rather than purpose. For the first time in its long existence, the capital world was self-contained, and it was failing. Inside the upper spires, the remaining rulers gathered for what everyone knew would be the final council. Fewer than a dozen thrones remained occupied. The rest were empty, some abandoned, some destroyed, some belonging to species that no longer existed as unified powers. The silence here was different. Not suspense. Acceptance. We should have seen this coming, the stone ruler said at last, its voice worn down by time and consequence. We ruled too long to notice decay. The mechanical ruler did not respond immediately. Its internal systems flickered as it rerouted power from non-essential processes. We mistook continuity for permanence, it said finally. Outside the spires, protests filled the lower levels of the capital. Citizens demanded food, energy, leadership, anything. The rulers heard them now. For centuries, distance had protected power from consequence. Humanity had removed the distance. A signal request appeared in the chamber. Human origin. No encryption. No threat. Just a request. The stone ruler closed its eyes. They are here. The human envoy appeared moments later, standing in the same place as before. Same posture. Same calm. The chamber felt smaller now. You have come to finish this, a ruler said quietly. No, the human replied. We have come to see if you will. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The mechanical ruler leaned forward. The galaxy is breaking apart. Worlds are dying. If this continues, there will be nothing left to govern. The human nodded. That is why we are here. The envoy gestured, and a projection filled the chamber, not of destruction, but of patterns. Networks. Thousands of local systems forming connections with one another. Cooperative clusters replacing centralized authority. Defense pacts built on proximity and trust instead of fear and obligation. This is what is replacing you, the human said. It is messy, imperfect, fragile. A pause. But it survives without you. The stone ruler's voice hardened. And what of us? The human looked at the remaining thrones. That, they said, is your decision. The rulers exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected execution. Exile. Erasure. Not choice. A bioluminescent ruler flickered weakly. If we step down, chaos will follow. Yes, the human said. For a time. The envoy stepped closer. But if you remain, they continued, collapse is guaranteed. The chamber shook, not from attack, but from failing infrastructure. The artificial star dimmed slightly as energy reserves dropped again. Tom was no longer on their side. The mechanical ruler spoke with a sound that almost resembled regret. We built a galaxy that depended on us. We did not know how to let go. You were never supposed to be permanent, the human replied. Neither were we. A long silence followed. Then, one by one, something unprecedented happened. A ruler stood, not in defiance, in surrender. I relinquish my claim, said the bioluminescent ruler. My people will govern themselves. Another followed. Then another. Thrones powered down, their symbols of authority fading as systems disconnected. Titles dissolved. Claims vanished. The capital star brightened slightly as load decreased. The stone ruler was last. It looked at the human envoy for a long moment. You could have destroyed us, it said. Why didn't you? The human's voice softened, not with mercy, but with honesty. Because then you would have been martyrs, they said. And nothing would change. The stone ruler nodded slowly. Then this ends, it said, rising from its throne. The throne powered down. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council ceased to exist. No explosion marked the moment. No announcement. Just silence. Outside the capital, something extraordinary happened. Human fleets moved, not inward, but outward. They formed a perimeter around the capital system, not as conquerors, but as jailers. No ships entered. No ships left. The capital was sealed, not destroyed, not occupied. Isolated. The human envoy broadcast one final message across the remaining galactic networks. The age of rulers is over, they said. No empire will rise here again. A pause. You will not be punished. You will not be forgiven. Another pause. You will be remembered. The transmission ended. Inside the sealed capital, the former rulers faced a reality they had never prepared for. They had no fleets, no authority, no one to command, only each other, and the consequences of their choices. Across the galaxy, news spread quickly. The council was gone. Not replaced. Gone. Panic flared in some regions. Celebration erupted in others. In many places, people simply stared at the stars, unsure what to feel. Humanity did not intervene. They watched. They waited. On Earth, or what remained of it, children stood beneath cracked skies, listening to lessons their ancestors never had. Power must answer to consequence. Silence can be stronger than violence. Never let someone else decide who deserves to survive. Human commanders monitored the galaxy, not for rebellion, but for imbalance. When local systems stabilized, human interference faded. When tyrants tried to rise, their supply lines quietly failed. No warnings. No speeches. Just absence. The galaxy learned quickly. Centuries of fear-driven rule collapsed in months. Not because humanity destroyed it, but because it could not exist without fear to sustain it. The sealed capital remained dark, a scar in space no one dared approach. It became a warning passed from generation to generation. That is where rulers went when they forgot the cost of power. In the quiet after collapse, a truth finally settled across the stars. Humanity had not taken the throne. They had removed the need for one. And as new civilizations found their footing, building slower, smaller, and stronger, they did so under a single, unspoken rule. Never ignore a species willing to disappear. Because when they return, they are not asking for permission. The galaxy did not celebrate. That surprised everyone. When the last throne powered down and the capital system sealed, many expected fireworks, revolutions, declarations, songs of freedom shouted across the stars. That was how history usually marked the fall of empires. Instead, there was work. Worlds that had depended on distant rulers now had to feed themselves. Systems that once waited for permission had to decide what they believed. Defense fleets were rebuilt smaller, closer to home, commanded by people who could see the faces they were protecting. Freedom, it turned out, was heavy. Humanity did not rush to guide it. They stepped back. Human fleets withdrew from most regions, dissolving into the dark between stars. Observers tracked them for a time, then lost them completely. No patrol routes, no fixed borders, no visible capital. Once again, humanity was becoming hard to find. Across the galaxy, stories began to spread. On a farming world that had nearly starved, elders told children how humans had restored one relay for exactly 3 days, long enough to share knowledge, not supplies, then vanished again. The world survived, scarred but stronger. On a former weapons forge, engineers whispered about a human ship that appeared above their planet without warning, shut down every offensive system in orbit, then left a single message. Build tools before you build weapons. The message never repeated. It didn't need to. Humanity had not become rulers. They had become something far more unsettling. A standard. No one voted them into that role. No one could remove them from it. They existed outside the structures the galaxy understood, watching quietly, intervening rarely, decisively, and without negotiation. That made them impossible to predict, which made them impossible to ignore. In academies and war colleges, a new field of study emerged. Human silence doctrine. Not officially named by humans. No one had ever heard them name it, but studied obsessively by everyone else. It focused on absence as strategy, on patience as power, on restraint not as weakness, but as preparation. The most chilling conclusion of the doctrine was simple. Humanity did not need to win wars. They only needed to survive them. And they were very, very good at that. On Earth, reconstruction finally began, not with grand projects, but with quiet choices. Atmosphere processors hummed beneath cracked skies. Seed vaults opened. Old cities were not rebuilt. New ones were placed carefully, modestly, where failure would not cascade. Human children learned history early. Not heroic stories. Warnings. They learned that humanity had once trusted systems too big to care. That they had once believed someone else would step in when things went wrong. They were taught never to repeat that mistake. A human teacher stood before a small class, pointing to a star map that showed the sealed capital system. Still dark, still unreachable. That is not an enemy, she said. That is a lesson. A child raised a hand. Will we ever open it? The teacher paused. Only if the galaxy forgets why it was closed, she replied. Elsewhere, the former rulers lived out their days inside the sealed system. They were not tortured, not executed. They were ignored. Supplies were sufficient. Technology functioned at a basic level. They could survive, but not thrive. For beings once worshipped as eternal, it was a quiet kind of punishment. They spent long cycles debating where it had gone wrong. Some blamed humanity. Others blamed themselves. None could escape the truth that hurt them most. They had been offered a chance to change long before humans ever returned. They had chosen comfort instead. As generations passed, the old galactic myths faded. New stories took their place, simpler ones, told in markets and schools and mess halls. Stories about a species that lost everything and learned. About a people who stopped shouting and started listening. About how the most terrifying moment in history was not when human fleets appeared, but when they stopped doing anything at all. A new galactic law emerged organically, without council or decree. It was never written down, but everyone understood it. If humans speak, listen. If humans warn, act. If humans go quiet, ask why. Because silence, the galaxy had learned, was humanity's final language. In the outer reaches, Far from trade lanes and old borders, a small fleet gathered. Human ships, sleek and unmarked. A commander watched reports from across the galaxy. Stability indexes rising. Local governance holding. No large-scale conflicts. No empire-level expansion. Another century, an officer said. Maybe longer. The commander nodded. Good, she replied. Let them grow without us. And if they don't? The commander looked out into the stars. Then we'll remind them, she said. The fleet dispersed, vanishing into deep space. No farewell. No announcement. Just absence. Back on a distant world, a young alien asked their parent why humans never stayed. The parent thought carefully before answering. Because if they stayed, they said, we would start relying on them. The child frowned. Are they good or bad? The parent smiled sadly. They're what happens, they said, when good people are pushed too far and refuse to let it happen again. The galaxy moved forward, slower now, more cautious, but alive in a way it had never been before. No single banner ruled the stars. No central voice decided who mattered. And hanging over everything was the quiet understanding that somewhere, unseen and patient, humanity still watched. Not as gods, not as kings, but as witnesses. And witnesses, the galaxy knew now, were far more dangerous than tyrants. Because tyrants could be overthrown. But memory endured. And humanity had become its guardian. Centuries passed. Not quietly, but carefully. The galaxy learned a new rhythm, slower and uneven, like a civilization relearning how to breathe after nearly drowning. There were wars, but they were small. There were tyrants, but they did not last. There were mistakes, but they did not spread unchecked across entire sectors. History no longer moved in sweeping arcs. It moved in hard lessons. Children born long after the fall of the Galactic Council grew up hearing stories that sounded unreal. Tales of rulers who governed from light years away. Of systems so vast they collapsed under their own weight. Of a species called humanity that had once vanished and returned. To many, humans were no longer a people. They were a moment in time. In academies, students studied the age of silence the way ancient scholars once studied natural disasters. Not as villains, not as heroes, but as a force that reshaped reality by refusing to play along. Records from that era were strangely incomplete. Humanity had not erased them. They had simply never filled them in. No grand declarations of victory. No manifestos. No official history written by human hands. Just fragments, testimonies, recordings, infrastructure diagrams, quiet instructions left behind and never repeated. It forced the galaxy to do something unfamiliar. Interpret. On one world, a historian argued that humanity had saved galactic civilization. On another, a philosopher claimed humanity had nearly destroyed it. Both were right, and that was the point. Humanity did not want to be understood. They wanted to be remembered correctly. Far from the rebuilt trade routes and cooperative clusters, there were places no ship traveled anymore. Dark systems, empty corridors, regions where sensors glitched and navigation felt uncertain. Not dangerous, uncomfortable. Everyone knew what they were. Human space, not marked by borders or warnings, just absence. Occasionally, a desperate fleet or ambitious explorer tried to enter. Most turned back when their instruments stopped agreeing with each other. A few pushed forward. None returned. Not destroyed. Redirected. Weeks later, those ships would reappear near their home systems. Unharmed, systems intact, crews shaken and silent. They never spoke about what they saw. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Humanity was still there. Still watching. Still choosing not to interfere. Until necessary. On Earth, the sky was blue again. Not as it once was, but enough. Oceans had returned in fragments. Forests grew where cities once stood. Humanity rebuilt slowly, refusing scale, refusing speed. They did not spread. They endured. A human child stood on a hill overlooking a small settlement, watching wind turbines turn above fields of engineered crops. Old ruins lay half-buried beneath green. Why don't we go back out there? The child asked, pointing at the stars. An elder sat beside them, scarred hands resting on a cane made from the hull of an ancient ship. We already did, the elder said. The child frowned. But why not rule? We could. The elder smiled, not kindly, not sadly, knowingly. So could they, the elder replied. That's why we won't. In distant systems, The sealed galactic capital remained untouched. Its artificial star still burned, dim but stable. Inside, descendants of the old rulers lived quiet, limited lives. They farmed. They argued. They aged. They were no longer immortal figures of history. They were citizens of consequence. Occasionally, a message would reach them, human, unencrypted, brief. Not orders. Reminders. Power without memory fails. Silence is not absence. You are still being watched. No reply was ever expected, and none was sent. The galaxy adapted around these truths. New alliances formed, not because they were enforced, but because they were useful. Defense groups focused on protection, not dominance. Trade networks built redundancies instead of efficiencies. Civilizations learned to ask a new question before every major decision. What happens if we are alone tomorrow? If the answer was collapse, the decision changed. That was humanity's greatest legacy. Not fear. Preparation. There came a day, long after the last human fleet had been seen, when a distant system burned. Not from war. From disaster. A star destabilized, threatening to wipe out every inhabited world nearby. The local coalition tried everything. They failed. As evacuation plans collapsed and panic spread, someone, no one knew who, sent a message into the dark. Not a plea. Not a demand. A confession. We are about to fail. We remember why you taught us this. If you do nothing, we understand. The message vanished into silence. Hours passed. The star grew brighter. Then, space folded. Human ships appeared. Few. Unmarked. Silent. They did not stabilize the star directly. Instead, they altered gravity flows, redirected debris, created safe corridors. Evacuation succeeded. Entire populations survived. When it was over, the ships were gone. No message left behind. No acknowledgement. The galaxy understood. Humanity would act, not to rule, not to save everyone, but to prevent lessons from being erased by extinction. They were not guardians of life. They were guardians of consequence. Generations later, a galactic archivist finalized a record titled The Age Humanity Chose. The final entry read, "They were offered peace when they were broken. They were offered power when they were feared. They chose neither.